Okay, so this is a lesson on the skin. So we're going to look at how we can label the skin and how the skin controls our body temperature. So I've got two quick start questions for you and you'll do now. So what is your body's normal temperature? Why do we need to keep our body at a normal temperature? So if we press pause now, give the answers a go and we will go through it in a second. Okay, so question 1 says, what is your body's normal temperature? Our temperature needs to be around 37.5 degrees. And then question 2, why do we need to keep our body at a normal temperature? And the reason this is all to do with enzymes involved in chemical reactions. We have many chemical reactions going on in our body which we need, and what happens when the temperature gets too hot or too cold with enzymes. If we can remember, we can add that to our answer. So at high temperatures and even low temperatures if it's really, really cold, and low enzymes, keyword, they denature, remember, okay? And that's important. So what is denaturing? It's when the active site, even though it was last year's stuff, they can still ask us this, okay, because it's relevant to this topic as well. The active site changes shape and the substrate can no longer bind to the enzyme. And then what happens then eventually is no reaction takes place. Because if all of the enzymes become denatured, no reaction is able to take place. So as we said, we're going to describe how the body maintains a constant temperature, and it's all to do with our skin. So first of all, what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is what we use to describe in maintaining a constant internal temperature, well, internal environment. So that includes temperature. It also includes the pH for enzymes, okay? And essentially the, let's say, amount of water, etc. Okay, it'll say body if you're dehydrated, and it knows then that we've got to try and absorb as much water as possible from our large intestine so we don't dehydrate, because obviously we need water. Our body's made with 70% water. Okay, so humans live in a variety of temperatures. Like all mammals, humans are endotherms, which means we are warm-blooded. Okay. And then the human body temperature must remain around 37 degrees, which we've looked at. And then we have already discussed that the enzymes denature, so they can't catalyse reaction in the cells, so no reactions take place. So processes like respiration, which is vital to us, will no longer take place. And same if it's below 37, especially if it's too far low. Okay, the function of the skin then. We need to know the 3 functions of the skin. So we've got it protects us from infection, because we look, it's a physical barrier. It helps us stop microorganisms like bacteria, viruses from entering and getting into our bloodstream. It keeps our body at the right temperature. This is what we're going to go in to look at this lesson. And we're covered in receptors so we can feel things, which you have done last lesson, I think, in Miss Farr's lesson. So we've got receptor cells in our skin so we can feel heat and pressure, etc., to cause a reflex action. If you touch something really, really hot, the receptors will say it's really hot and you'll pull your arm away in a reflex action. If you remember a reflex action, let's recap this from last lesson. The reflex action is automatic. Remember 2 things about it, and protective. Okay, the reason we have it automatic, we don't think about it. You don't put your hand on like the hot oven and be like, oh, this is really, really hot, it's burning my skin. No, you put your hand on hot and straight away you pull your arm back. Okay, so it's automatic and it's protective, to stop yourself ideally from getting hurt. So we have the layer of the skin then, okay? We need to look at these and we need to remember them. So we have, let me get my pointer, we have the hair, okay? Stick it out. Your skin is covered in hairs, tiny little hairs, and they are vital to helping us maintain our body temperature. On our hair then, we have here what is called the erector muscle, okay? We like this one because of the word. And then we've got the erector muscle, and what that does, it's going to relax or contract to stand the hairs up on their end or to lie them flat against the skin. We then have blood vessels under the skin, okay, which we can see here. We have a layer of fat, which will help keep us warm. We also have a sweat gland. On the sweat gland then we have, which we could label here, which is the sweat duct, which is essentially the tube that carries the sweat from the gland to the surface of the skin, and we can label here the sweat pore. Okay. Then we've got a temperature receptor, which is going to receptor cells in our skin, we said, but for temperature to know if it's too hot, too cold, are we going to pull our hands away, etc. And then we have the epidermal layer, which is just the skin in itself, the top layer. Okay. Right, what I would like you to do then, can we label the skin? So press pause and then give the questions a go. Can we label the skin for me? Right, okay, so the first one, we've got the hair, nice and easy to remember. On the hair then, we have the erector muscle. At the bottom then, we have our capillaries or blood vessels. Then from there we have our fat layer and our sweat gland that produces sweat if we're too warm. Then we've got our temperature receptor. And we have our epidermis. Okay, what's going to be important when we're looking at how we keep warm is the hair, erector muscle, capillaries, and our sweat glands. Okay, these are the four we need to remember. These are the four we're like really important in how we control our body temperature. Okay, so on a hot day then, there are three things that happen on a hot day. Okay, so on a hot day we are warm. Okay, so when we are warm. Okay, so when we are warm, we have vasodilation of blood vessels. So all that means is that the blood vessels get wider. So they're narrow here, and what they would do then is that these blood vessels will get wider, and as they get wider, if I try and draw it on here, as you can see, if I could draw it, they will get wider, and as they get wider then they get closer to the skin. And the reason that is then more blood can flow through quicker, okay, and as it moves through quicker it's going to release heat through the epidermis, okay, and that's why people, when they're warm, they look really red in the face, because their blood vessels have got wider through vasodilation, and they're closer to the surface of the skin, which makes them look red, but they release heat to try and cool them down. We also have then evaporation of sweat. So here's our sweat gland, and as you can see then we have sweat on the surface of our skin. So we have vasodilation when we're hot, we have sweat glands produce sweat. What happens then is that the hair erector muscle is relaxed. So the muscle's relaxed, and what happens then, the hairs are lying flat, okay? They're lying flat against the surface of our skin, and therefore we can lose heat easily from our blood vessels, etc. And then we don't shiver. But I'm going to put that on there because it's the opposite on a cold day. On a cold day then, so So when you are cold, okay, we have then vasoconstriction, so it's constricting, so it's getting smaller, so our blood vessels then get narrower on cold days. And then on a cold day then we have vasoconstriction, so they get narrower, and the reason that is then it's to have less blood flowing through our blood vessels, so we can try and keep as much heat in as possible. Okay, obviously our sweat glands then won't produce sweat, but our body will shiver instead. Okay, so if we're looking at the three things that happen when we're cold, we've got vasoconstriction, we've got the body starts to shiver, and then what happens then, difference then, is the hair erector muscle, okay, it contracts. Okay, so the hair erector muscle, it contracts. It's a muscle, we use the word contract or relax. And as it contracts, the hairs stand up on end. And as they're standing up on end, what happens then is that little air particles are trapped between the hairs, okay? And they form a layer of air between the hair and the skin, which then like acts like an insulating layer to try and keep you warm. Right, so can we explain what happens to the skin on hot and cold conditions? So can we write down the 4 things that happen, skin in cold conditions and skin in hot conditions, and we can go through the answers. So press pause and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so on a cold condition, we have vasoconstriction. Okay, so blood vessels, I miss vessels, get narrower. Then we have the body shivers. Okay, we also then have the hair erector muscle contracts and hairs stand up, trapping heat. Okay, we could put no sweat produced, but in the exam question we don't want to write that as an example of what happens on a cold day. Use the first 3 first if they want 2 examples. Okay, then on a hot day we have the opposite, so we have vasodilation. I've gone the colours according to when it's hot and cold, so the blood vessels get wider. Then we have sweat produced from sweat glands. And then we have the erector muscle relaxes. And, I was going to say and, hair lies flat. Okay, and then obviously no shivering, but again you are going to use the first 3 if they ask for 1 or 2 examples. Okay, so what I would like you to do now is try and answer the past paper questions, okay, on the skin. They're very, very similar. You will notice that when you answer these 2 questions that you are writing the same thing over and over again, because they can only ask it so many ways. It's a really, really good question and topic to have, because they can only ask it so many ways, because it's a process. You just need to learn this. Okay, any questions, message me on email and I will get back to you. Thank you.